There's lots of different shapes and sizes of bass jigs. How do you know which one to choose to catch more bass in your area? We're going to talk about that.
Welcome back to another episode of 5-Minute Fish Talk.
Good morning and happy Friday. I've got 5 minutes on this time of year, and you know what that means. Boop, it's time to get real. Today we're talking about skirted bass jigs, and we can all agree that these things are proven bass catching machines. Whether you live in Washington State or Florida or anywhere in between, bass fishing and jigs go hand in hand. These things are what every angler needs in their box if they're looking for big bass. Now, what I wanted to talk about in particular is the fact that there is a lot of variation in head shape and hook design and skirts and so on and so forth that I wanted to cover down on. Now today I'm really going to hone in on the different head designs with regards to jigs, because each one of those is going to have a little bit more of a purpose with regards to where to throw it and how to fish it. So, by the end of this video, hopefully you'll have an understanding as to what the difference between a swim jig and a football jig is and everything in between. And then at the end of this video, you'll also be able to make a decision for yourself as to what is going to work best for you in your neck of the woods. The other thing that I'm going to go ahead and call out right now is that at the very end of this video, I'm going to have a video linked right up there that's all about finesse jigs, catching some big bass in my area. So if you want more of a visual demonstration as to how to fish them, you can obviously click that video up there. Again, that's going to show up in the last 20 seconds. Regardless, let's get right into it. Let's talk about football jigs first, and then I'll make my way through the other ones, and then we'll draw our conclusion. Football jigs. How do they get that name with a head like that? Go figure. These things basically have a head that looks exactly like a football. What that allows it to do is ride through hard bottoms like rock and some trees really well, and it keeps that hook point sticking up at about a 45-degree angle. So it looks very natural down there. Some of these are really good for, fishing down on deep water. So you might be fishing a deep point or a deep hump or a ledge, so on and so forth. These are really a great bait for fishing structure in deep water. So, on the contrary, we've got finesse jigs, and unlike the football head, this one actually has more of a round ball head most of the time. The other thing you'll notice is it has half of a skirt, so it's got less skirt material, and really what that comes down to is it allows it to be a much more finesse approach, and it doesn't have quite as bulky of a profile down there. Now, I personally love these jigs because they catch a lot of fish, but they still maintain really good quality. So back in the Midwest, when I was fishing in Kansas and Missouri and Arkansas, a finesse jig was one of my best friends because I was fishing in a lot of shallow, rocky water, and these tend to ride through rock really well. They don't ride through vegetation well. Just the same as the football jig, the finesse jig, these are not really good for weedy lakes, but they are good for hard bottoms as well as, stumps and trees, so on and so forth. Now the next thing that I wanted to talk about is very similar to these two jigs, but it's actually a lot more versatile. And this is what I would consider more of a structure jig. And I would really consider this a great all-around jig, and that's why these in particular are some of my favorites for pretty much fishing anywhere. So if I want to be, maybe I'm going to swim my jig, maybe I'm going to throw it on a deep point, maybe I'm going to flip a dock, maybe I'm going to flip a shallow laydown, so on and so forth. This is kind of my all-purpose jig. And I call it a structure jig, but I don't really have another name for it. Essentially, here's the head design. It kind of has that, round shape to it to where it can ride over rocks really well, but at the same time you can see that it also kind of has a keel to it to where you can skip it under docks. It's got a big meaty hook on it. This one happens to be a Trophy Bass Company jig. That actually is a company that's owned by two of my great friends, so I always really like to support them. But the other thing is, it's just straight up the best jig that I've ever fished with, so obviously I like that. Now the next jig is very similar in many ways, and that's just a Flippin jig. Now it's more of like that teardrop shaped head. These can vary a lot in head design when you're fishing with a Flippin jig, but essentially these are designed to come through shallow brush, shallow stumps, flipping close quarters in any kind of nasty, grimy material for bass. I don't really fish a lot of jigs around vegetation. Even flipping jigs don't tend to ride through vegetation super well. You can get grass jigs, and essentially that just has a little bit more conical shaped head to where it can ride through the grass a little bit better. But essentially all of these, I'm going to fish more around trees and rocks than I would vegetation personally. But that's where the swim jig is going to be very much different. Swim jigs are great baits to move water with. They are unlike any other jig in the sense that you tend to be moving water and casting and winding with these. What that allows it to do is obviously cover water, but then on top of that you can fish it around vegetation, you can fish it around trees, you can fish it around really anything, maintain that large profile of a jig so you're still drawing in big fish, but it's a very, very different presentation. So regardless, those are all the different types of jigs. I know that they're all very similar in many ways, but at the same time, you can clearly see they each serve a different purpose. My recommendation for you is to take a look at the types of bodies of water you're fishing in and kind of, whew, I went 5 minutes. I never do that. Take a look at the bodies of water you're fishing in and decide which head design is going to work best for your waters. Like I said, you can check that video out right up there. Otherwise, drop a comment if you have any questions, and you know what I'm going to say next, right? Have yourself a fantastic weekend, and we'll catch you next time.